Let's be honest right from the start. If humanity is going to become a multi-planetary species, if we're going to live on Mars, travel to distant moons, or spend decades aboard interstellar spacecraft, we're going to have to talk about sex in space. Yes, that topic. The one NASA avoids like it's a black hole ready to swallow their entire PR department. The one astronauts pretend doesn't exist. And the one you absolutely clicked on out of curiosity. Don't worry, you're in good company. Because today, we're diving into the weird, wild, 100% real science behind how human intimacy, reproduction, and biology could or could not work beyond Earth. I'm your host, an astrophysicist, a biologist, and apparently today, your interplanetary sex ed teacher. Buckle up, or maybe unbuckle. Either way, let's begin. NASA has a rule. If a journalist asks about sex in space, suddenly everyone becomes very interested in thermal shielding or radiation dosage. Officially, there's no documented case of humans having sex in space. Unofficially, well, astronauts are professionals, highly monitored, and live in glorified tin cans with cameras everywhere, so the opportunities are limited. There have been couples in space. There have been married astronauts. There have been long-duration mixed-gender crews. But the official line stays the same. No sex has happened in space, which is adorable, because NASA knows perfectly well that the first human conceived off Earth will be the biggest news story in the history of the species, and the biggest liability nightmare they've ever faced. This avoidance, though, creates a scientific blind spot, one we desperately need to fill. Because, spoiler, humanity isn't going anywhere long-term unless we figure this out. Let's begin with physics, because before things can get steamy, they have to get stable. In microgravity, Newton's third law becomes the third wheel nobody asked for. Push against your partner, you drift away. Try to get close, you spin apart. Two people in microgravity are basically two slippery soap bars in a slowly rotating bathtub. The mechanics become complicated. Without gravity anchoring you to a surface, you need straps, rails, elastic harnesses, or, well, creativity. NASA has actually studied this not in a sexy way, but to understand motion, stabilization, and how astronauts coordinate tasks when their bodies float freely. Let's put it simply, making out in space is already difficult. Making babies? That requires engineering. So yes, the first space bedroom might look less like a honeymoon suite and more like a CrossFit resistance training station. On Earth, intimacy depends on a complex dance of hormones, nerves, and crucially, blood flow. But in space, blood doesn't settle downward. It floats evenly throughout the body. That's why astronauts get puffy face syndrome. This means that arousal might be harder to achieve, harder to maintain, and in some cases, strange or uncomfortable. Your body has evolved for 1G. In 0G, the biological systems that support sexual function behave differently. Let's be delicately blunt. Even if the mood is right, the plumbing may not cooperate. But that's just the beginning. Even if two consenting astronauts manage to defeat physics long enough to conceive a child in orbit, nature may have the final veto. Reproduction isn't just about the moment of conception, it's about fetal development. And here's where things get serious. Studies on rodents, fish, frogs, insects, and even tiny nematode worms show alarming patterns. Embryos exposed to microgravity often have disrupted development. Cells divide irregularly, organs form incorrectly, bone structure becomes abnormal, neural pathways don't wire themselves properly. Gravity is not just a force, it's a biological signal. Life evolved to use it as a guide. No species, including ours, has successfully raised healthy offspring entirely in microgravity. So if two humans conceived a child in orbit today, the pregnancy could be extremely high risk or non-viable. This is why space agencies are extremely cautious. They don't want humanity's first extraterrestrial baby to also be humanity's first extraterrestrial tragedy. Beyond Earth's magnetic shield, space becomes a cosmic tanning bed from hell. Radiation doses on the ISS are much higher than on Earth. On a mission to Mars, multiply that several times. Radiation can damage sperm, damage eggs, mutate DNA, sabotage fetal development. Think of it this way. Space is like a place where the universe itself is screaming, "Not safe for babies!" Until spacecraft have heavy radiation shielding, unprotected space conception could lead to severe developmental issues. So yes, radiation is basically serving as humanity's involuntary interplanetary contraception. Microgravity is a nightmare for reproduction. So what about Mars? Mars has some gravity, about 38% of Earth's. It's unclear whether that's enough for healthy human reproduction, but it's definitely better than zero. A Mars habitat could provide private spaces, stabilize bodies, reduce radiation with underground shielding, offer a more Earth-like environment. In other words, the first Mars babies are much more likely than the first space babies, but there's still uncertainty. Even 0.38 g might not be enough for normal embryonic development. We may need artificial gravity, rotating habitats, or genetic adaptations in the very distant future. Still, if you had to bet money on where sex in space actually happens first, Mars is the frontrunner. Let's shift gears. Sex isn't purely mechanical. It's emotional, psychological, and deeply social. Space missions are stressful, isolating, full of danger, and monitored 24/7. Stress lowers libido, lack of privacy kills intimacy, and being filmed constantly? Absolutely mood-shattering. But long-term missions like a 2-year journey to Mars make romance inevitable. Humans bond under pressure. They develop attachments, they seek comfort, and yes, they get lonely. NASA can delay this conversation, but evolution will not. When humans live in space long-term, relationships will happen, and so will everything else relationships involve. Alright, let's get technically cheeky. Engineers have actually modeled what a private microgravity intimacy module would require. Key features include anchoring points for stability, ventilation systems for airflow in closed spaces, sound dampening because imagine hearing that through the station, privacy shielding for psychological comfort, medical monitoring because, well, it's space, sanitation systems for reasons I refuse to detail. Think of it as part bedroom, part lab, part gym, part counseling office. And yes, it will probably have instruction manuals. This is the future we chose, or at least the future Elon Musk is trying to rush us toward. Before humanity starts making cosmic babies, we need to ask some tough ethical questions. Who's responsible if something goes wrong? Should pregnancy in space be allowed at all right now? Who decides? NASA? ESA? SpaceX? The couple? What if a fetus is harmed by radiation? What about consent when missions have strict hierarchies? What about interpersonal drama in confined habitats? Imagine a love triangle in a tin can, 60 million miles from Earth. Now that's a reality show we don't want. Space agencies will need clear policies, medical safeguards, and psychological support long before humanity attempts reproduction beyond Earth. Here's the biggest question of all. Are humans even compatible with space reproduction in our current form? Maybe not. Long-term, humanity may need genetic adaptation, artificial gravity habitats, radiation-proofed biology, new reproductive technologies, assisted gestation like artificial wombs. Because right now, nature is telling us, Earth-grown humans are not space-ready parents. But that can change. Humans have rewritten biology before, and we will again. One day, whether on Mars, on a moon base, or inside a spinning artificial gravity habitat, a human baby will be born off Earth. And in that moment, something profound will happen. Humanity will no longer be an Earth species, but a spacefaring lineage. A civilization with roots in the stars. A species that has taken evolution into its own hands. That child's birth certificate will list a birthplace not found on any map. It will say Mars, or Lunar Base Alpha, or Orbital Habitat 1. And that baby, the first true extraterrestrial human, will force us to rethink everything we know about biology, identity, nationality, and what it means to be home. But before all of that, we have to figure out the basics. Physics, biology, psychology, and yes, how to make love without bouncing off the walls. Sex in space isn't a joke. Well, okay, today it kind of is. But eventually, it becomes one of the most important scientific questions of our time. Because if we plan to explore space not as astronauts, but as families, as communities, as generations, then intimacy, reproduction, and the continuation of our species among the stars becomes essential. Humanity's destiny isn't just to visit space, it's to live there, to grow there, to love there, and one day, to raise children who look up at Earth the same way we look up at the moon, a distant light in a dark sky, shining with the memory of where we came from. So yes, sex in space is funny, but it's also the key to the next chapter of our evolution, and that chapter is just beginning. Thanks for watching, and remember, in space, no one can hear you flirt. Remember to like and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what do you think it would feel like to have sex in space?